if our community received even fare, what would
Yep.
happen?
That tracks right with this chapter. I know we're going to talk about it, but it's pretty amazing.
Chapter 17, Empowerment Through Wealth, discusses the history of Africans generating economic power through its accomplishments of creating wealth within black communities using their own resources, as well as the investments made towards Africa for Liberia to be a nation where the diasporans can return. In addition, we also discover in this chapter major setbacks and repression that may have hindered and stunted the growth of Africans being able to enrich, empower, and liberate themselves from assimilating within the American system. However, though, Amos Wilson concludes that despite the downfalls in the past, it is important for Africans to rediscover, refurbish, and revitalize the connection amongst the African and African Americans to, in many ways, going forward and conquer. So, we could start off with question one with the barriers that African Americans face in building wealth and economic security in the United States. When I thought of this question, I thought of the three major components that Amos Wilson talks about. This was in the section of repression of African American power, where he talks about white Americans, immigrants, as well as the black leadership that pretty much slowed down the process of building, within black
It's
communities.
important to note too, and he does in this chapter that that's not something that Black community initiates, having folks immigrate into open businesses and what have you because somehow we can't do it. I mean, I'm
Right.
paraphrasing, but basically, that again is something that's decided by the power structure. But immigrants come in, the business owners who obviously, to a certain extent, run government, decide to instead of utilizing the labor here, decide to go outside and pull in people who will work for even lower wages, and that further depresses the inner city areas, the quote unquote becomes ghettos,
Mm-hmm.
and affects our community specifically. But again, it's not something that we initiate or ask for. It's somebody else making decisions that affects us. I mean, that kind of looking at it, he emphasizes that we have to take control. We have to. It's literally in order to for us to solve issues. It's got to be us being in control. It should be something that's kind of obvious, but because of the three factors that you mentioned, underrated, that kind of suppress that or try to annihilate that amongst our folks. Those hurdles cause a big issue for us, and a lot of people don't think of complete control in order for us to. They think of working within the system, and that's not control.
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting too because that third component, which was the live stream that we just had,
Yes, yes, yeah.
the
Yep.
in page 442, the
Right.
black bourgeoisie's repression of black entrepreneurialism.
I got it. I got it highlighted. The non-economic liberalism is what was emphasized. And it involves the projecting of strong reformist impulses in the realms of civil liberties, race relations, and foreign affairs, but not in the basic distribution of wealth and power. Everything else is emphasized, but wealth and power for the
Yep.
community.
Yep. And that also supports, integrating,
Mhm,
assimilating.
mhm.
So not to focus on what we should do and how we can, gain leverage, but let's be a part of this because in their eyes, this is the best route to go. when we talk about what country was being invested as a resettlement, which obviously was Liberia.
Right, right, right.
That is something that, in the past and even now, that we could capitalize off of and still promote. And I just found it amazing from just those 5 pages, the progression that Marcus Garvey was making towards Liberia.
Yes.
Him
I
him
forgot Booker T. Washington was the one that he found the inspiration for entrepreneurship. But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, he was moving to definitely towards Liberia and sent over was it so he couldn't leave the country, I think at that point. I forgot what the reason was, but had a representative go over.
Right.
Um
And
yeah.
these representatives, I mean, they each had, a different role. You had one that was a mechanical engineer and a builder. You had one that
Uh-huh.
was an electrical engineer and a builder. And there was the 3 others, I forgot what they were, but
Yeah, I gotta find it.
they all went there
Yeah.
to represent and to, pretty much report back. Marcus Garvey was also organized of having a layout, to send over to the country of Liberia so that when the government sees it, they can understand what the mission statement is and what the overall objective was. And you can just tell things were moving. It was going to be a big effect. Question 3, in pages 421 to 425. I wanted to know the takeaways that we thought, coming from the sections of Tulsa, the Black Land Promise, Black Phoenix Rises from Ashes, and All Black Towns in America. One of my takeaways from those pages were just the accomplishments that were made within that time period, and even also how they bounced back from it. So Tulsa, Oklahoma was a famous landmark for the Black community. Businesses were being built there. There was even a table in page 424 that shows the number of establishments made during that time in 1921, where there was multiple dentists, cleaners and dryers, bakers, blacksmiths, and you even had, names for these cities like Deep Greenwood, and it was just known for its purpose. And even after the riot, where everything was, destroyed from the white folks, because obviously they were threatened by the success of it. It took within that year from 1921 to 1922 to rebuild, and even became a bit stronger than they were the previous year. And my last takeaway from it too was, one of the Black towns in Oklahoma, Boley, and Amos Wilson talks about from 1921, Boley had a possession of $150,000 of schools, cement sidewalks, residencies, temples, power plant, waterworks. I mean, just a telephone system, cotton gins. And back in that time period, the population wasn't a lot as it is now. And I'm always just thinking to myself, man, imagine what we could do with $150,000 in Liberia. So much could be done now. And there's just no excuse for that. There's none.
Yeah, you know what I saw that was impressive was that these businesses survived during the Depression.
Yep.
Yes.
So
I
that
forgot
was
about that.
amazing.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yep.
So I think like our communities just needs to be reminded of what has been done in the past, because I think just the psychological warfare that exists from, the white community to our community, a lot of people just don't really realize that the capability is still there.
Right.
It's an excellent, and that's a great example of how critical it is that we educate ourselves. At
Hmm.
um, as far as with the children, even if they go to public school, they go to public school during the week. Uh, if it's not in the evening when they come back from school, maybe that the Saturday schools it's talked about um, happen, on a more broad base for our folks, just to emphasize the positives, because my goodness, negatives, it's nonstop. It's nonstop. And even with, some of us, when we're disappointed with how things are going or whatever, we'll emphasize the negative. I mean, it can happen to all of us. It's easy to pile on. And that becomes all, like for instance, younger people here is the negative, and what stands out is the negative. And these kinds of stories, and this is, I mean, reading this was just the norm. Our people to constantly, and I've never thought that we were, the worst of the worst, and we never did anything, and I don't mean anything like that, but
Hmm.
looking at this, just how impressive, excuse me, just how impressive through all kinds of horrible times, the depression, as we mentioned. It's fantastic to read that, and a great reminder that we are a great people. We are a great people.
Cal Fomble, said it on one of the live streams. Liberia is the Black Wall Street that never dies. That's the difference between Liberia and Tulsa. Liberia is something that we actually own and we could actually, build on top of without it being destroyed. The only thing, if destroyed, it'll just be ourselves doing it, right? Having the wrong type of leadership, and nothing is, being progressed. Story of Tulsa, is definitely something that, people around my age and even younger kids should be inspired by.
Yeah, yeah,
And some
absolutely.
and at the same time, you do have the folks who do the Negro stalling tactics as to use Tulsa as why we should do it right here.
Absolutely. That's a
That's
great yes.
that's like
Yes.
another part as well.
Yes.
And
It's a great point.
goes back to, the black bourgeoisie, where you're trying to manipulate and convince people, well, we could just do it right here because,
Mhm.
from history, it was written and it was done. And it's like, yeah, that is definitely true. But however, it's important that we have to go back and, change up the playbook a bit. What is it that we should have did first in order to, support black communities, or support, a Tulsa, Oklahoma, or the Black Wall Street that's in Atlanta, which is obviously having a nation state. Because when you have that home base, then you have people that can protect you. You have, people that are on your side. You have a team, an agenda. You're taken a lot more seriously.
Right. Well, that's a that's a great point that it's used as an example of why we should stay put, stay right here, do it right here, and that we can do it right here because see, we've done it,
Right.
so we can do it right here. Don't cut and run. But I, I, I again, I go back to we shouldn't have to keep going through this because it was done, and then look what happened to it.
Hmm.
You know, and okay, people who say we could do it right here. Okay, what's your solution to this then? What's your analysis and what's your solution um, to this? And people who usually are the do it right here types don't go through that whole thought process.
We could pretty much close this off here. Chapter 18 will be Benevolent Fronts Assault Local and Global African Markets. I'm curious to know what